Greetings, vintage Star Wars fans. Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to explore the 1978 Kenner remote control Artoo Detoo. More specifically, mine. But before we take a look at the droid that's been with me since childhood, let's first learn a little about this classic toy. Kenner's remote control Artoo Detoo hit store shelves in 1978, right at the peak of Star Wars mania, following the film's release the year prior. Artoo Detoo had already captured the hearts of audiences as the plucky astromech hero, and toy makers knew a standalone Artoo figure wouldn't be enough. This remote control version stood about 8 inches tall and rolled across the floor using a battery-powered motor. It was controlled by a simple handheld plastic remote with a wire antenna, a classic design choice that was among the earliest attempts to bring interactivity to the Star Wars line. Released before Kenner's motorized Jawa sandcrawler, the remote control Artoo Detoo stands as the first battery-operated, remote-controlled toy in the Star Wars lineup, a notable milestone as the company began experimenting with more active play features. The remote control Artoo was also unique in that it hinted at a different type of play pattern. While the bulk of Kenner's early Star Wars line focused on action-oriented figures, vehicles, and playsets, this toy nudged into novelty territory, where movement and surprise were the appeal, not imaginative roleplay. For some kids, this was their very first experience with a battery-powered toy that responded to their input, even if that input was just pressing a button to roll forward and turn. Artoo's popularity in 1978 also made him an ideal candidate for experimentation. His shape lent itself to a self-contained mechanism. No arms, no legs, no head to pose. The dome and barrel design allowed Kenner's engineers to tuck in a simple motor and wheel system without compromising the overall silhouette. And since no actor likeness had to be negotiated, it was easier and cheaper to bring him to market. That simplicity also meant the remote control Artoo Detoo could be sold as a standalone novelty during a time when many Star Wars toys were being bundled into more complex environments. He could roll across a hardwood floor or kitchen linoleum, needing no Death Star or Tatooine backdrop to feel fun. In a way, that independence made him even more appealing. A tiny, moving ambassador of the galaxy far, far away. This remote-controlled version of Artoo Detoo wasn't packed with features, but what it did offer was something kids of the late 70s were just beginning to experience: movement. At a time when most action figures were static plastic sculptures, this little droid could actually roam the floor, zigzag around furniture, and feel, at least in the moment, like it had a personality all its own. The toy operated using a battery-powered remote, a simple black handheld unit with a long wire antenna. A single rocker button labeled head on one end and body on the other controlled the unit. Pressing the side labeled body sent Artoo rolling forward. Pressing the side labeled head made his head spin in place. Whichever direction Artoo was facing determined his direction. With some practice, a child could alternate between them to pull off primitive turns or even navigate tight spaces. Here is an excerpt from the instruction manual describing this functionality. To make Artoo walk, press the upper part of the button labeled body. To turn his head, press the lower part of the button labeled head. The head only rotates in one direction, clockwise. To move Artoo forward, rotate his head until the central red eye faces straight ahead. Then, press the top button on the transmitter. For reverse movement, turn the head so the red eye points to the back and press the same button. You can also steer Artoo left or right. Just rotate the head in the direction you want him to go, then press the transmitter button. He'll keep turning until you release it. Before we dive any further into how it all works, this might be a good time to showcase my remote control Artoo unit exactly as I found it. I packed this away myself more than 40 years ago. The box isn't particularly noteworthy, just an unassuming old cardboard container holding a handful of vintage Star Wars collectibles from my childhood. But packed inside, beneath layers of time and dust, is the remote control Artoo unit that brought this whole video to life. So as I open the box on camera, I'll share the moment of rediscovery. And together, we'll revisit this childhood toy for the first time in more than 4 decades. Parts of the tape had almost completely given up, I didn't remember exactly how I packed it, but I must have thought this plastic bag would keep things safe. Not exactly archival storage, but it did the trick. And there it is, just as I left it. I'll hold off on the remote for now. We'll take a closer look at that in a little bit. Now that he's out of the box, we can get a good look at this little droid in his current state. Starting with the front, you can see the years have left their mark. There's some surface yellowing here and there, and his dome could use a bit of polishing. Overall, not too bad though, considering his age and how he was stored. Rotating to the left side, the legs are still intact and appear to be undamaged. Again, there's a bit of yellowing, but that's not unusual for these early Kenner toys. Around the back, there's a little more discoloration. Nothing too extravagant though. The power switch looks intact and ready for use. The right side is in similar shape to the left. Not pristine, but not bad either. For a remote control toy from the late 1970s, I'd say he's held up remarkably well. Flipping him on his back, you can see the wheels, which we'll be testing later, and the original electronics warning sticker, still fully legible, along with the inspection sticker. That's a detail that tends to go missing over time, so I'm glad to see it still in place. These battery-powered units were often rolled across the floor, so seeing the wheels in this good of shape is also a welcome sight. Overall, he's dusty and looks a little tired, but still standing proud. Let's give him a quick test straight out of the box to see if he still functions. Then we'll give him a good cleaning and see if we can spruce him up a bit. To test the functionality, let's start by following the instructions in the manual. First, we need to remove the battery cover from the back of the unit by pushing the tab down and pulling the door outward. Then we insert the two C batteries, which power the motor and move the toy in a given direction. Next, we snap the 9-volt battery into place. This powers the signal receiver, which receives commands from the remote. With the battery cover back in place, it's time to move on to the remote control. It's just as important to the setup. The design is simple and very much of its time, with a single spring-action rocker switch at the top. This was Kenner's earliest remote control design for its Star Wars toys, and overall it's in pretty good shape. The casing has held up well, and all the decals are still in place. There's a little wear here and there, but nothing unexpected for a toy from the late 1970s. The antenna simply screws into the top of the unit. These were often lost or bent over the years, so it's always a nice surprise when one survives. I remember how this always made it feel like you were holding something high-tech, even though it only sent one command at a time. In accordance with the manual, the remote takes a single 9-volt battery. Let's take a look inside. The compartment is on the bottom, and like many toys of the time, it just slides open without the need for a screwdriver. Inside is the standard snap connector for a 9-volt battery. Ordinarily, once the battery's in place, I'd slide the cover back on. However, this particular remote is notorious for making it difficult to remove the battery, sometimes requiring a pair of tweezers or a similar tool to get it back out. So for our testing purposes, I'm going to leave the battery cover off and avoid inserting the battery all the way. It just makes things go a little smoother. With the battery in place, and the cover left off for now, it's time to see if this little guy still works after all these years. We'll start by flipping the rocker switch on the remote and watching for any signs of life. That initial chirp is a good sign. This signals that Artoo has power and is ready to receive commands from the remote. Since this setup relies on radio signals, there's no need to aim the remote directly at the toy. But it does mean we're at the mercy of environmental interference. Next, I'll test both the body and head functions to see how the toy responds. Pressing the body button should send Artoo rolling forward in the direction of his radar eye. Pressing the head button should rotate the dome and activate the internal red LED, often accompanied by beeping. These are the kinds of cues I'm looking for during this phase. Motion, light, sound, anything to indicate the signal is getting through. Everything seems to be working, at least partially. The head turns on command, The radar eye lights up, and the beeping confirms the signal is being received. But there's one critical issue. R2's not moving. No matter which direction I try, the wheels just won't engage. This is a common problem with older motorized toys. After decades in storage, the original lubricants can thicken or harden completely, locking up internal gears. And given this toy's history, never dropped, never mishandled, and carefully packed away over 40 years ago, a mechanical issue like that makes a lot of sense. There are plenty of tutorials out there showing how to take this unit apart, inspect the gears, and clean or re-lubricate the mechanism. But since I still don't know the exact cause of the problem, I've decided to leave the internal work to a professional, someone who specializes in vintage electronics and restoration. Before I hand it off, though, I want to give the exterior a proper cleaning. After all, if it's going in for repairs, it might as well go in looking its best. Before I begin cleaning, I'll start by removing the outer leg coverings. These are purely decorative, just plastic shells with no internal mechanics or wiring, so they're easy to take off and even easier to clean once separated from the main unit. That's as far as I'll be disassembling things myself. The rest of the cleaning will focus on the dome and body. For this job, I'm using the same Wrist Clean product featured back in episode 20. The one I used while restoring vintage watch faces. It comes with a soft bristle brush that's ideal for getting into the textured grooves without scratching the plastic. This isn't about a full restoration. It's about gently lifting decades of surface grime without compromising the patina or originality of the toy. Once everything is wiped down and dry, R2 will be ready for the next step. As I previously mentioned, I've decided to take this unit to a professional who specializes in vintage electronics. While I could attempt the repair myself, and under different circumstances I might, I want to be certain there aren't any deeper issues hiding beneath the surface. My goal here isn't just to get R2 moving again, it's to repack this toy in the best possible condition and safely place it into long-term storage in full working order. That way, if someone opens the box in another 40 years, it will be as ready as it can be to get rolling with minimal effort. After a bit of searching, I came across a small local electronics repair shop, the kind that still proudly repairs record players, analog stereo systems, and old-school headphones. Just browsing through their website brought an unexpected sense of calm. These were the kinds of devices I grew up around, and seeing them again instantly told me that my remote control Artoo Detoo was in the right place. It was all from the same era, after all. Inside, I found a 71-year-old Vietnam veteran named Jimmy. Back in the war, he worked on helicopters for the Army, and now, decades later, he's still working with precision electronics, only smaller and with fewer moving parts. Given his pedigree, I'd say looking at a toy robot from the 1970s, especially one that runs on C batteries, is well within his range. All things considered, I think he's more than qualified.
Hear a lot of carbon scoring here. Looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
After a bit of back and forth and a couple of weeks' wait, I finally got the call. R2 had been brought back to life. I immediately went and picked him up. The results of his work speak for themselves. From that Christmas morning in 1980 to today, this little robot has been with me through decades of memories. Now he's repaired, preserved, and ready for the next chapter. To keep R2 safe going forward, I'm going to store him in a styrofoam box. You see, each month I receive a service package where the items arrive packed inside these small styrofoam containers. I usually keep a few of them on hand in case they come in handy, and in this case, the fit is absolutely perfect. It makes an excellent long-term storage solution for this remote control Artoo Detoo. Before we wrap R2 and nestle him in, it's time to make sure all of his accessories are stored safely alongside him. Included with him are 2 new motors. Jimmy rebuilt the existing ones, but these fresh motors were ordered just in case they're ever needed. I've also added an additional repair kit, sealed in plastic to ensure spare parts are always available. Alongside that, there's a reprinted instruction manual, protective wrapping, and a small packet of silica gel to help control moisture. Next, we have the remote control handle and its antenna. I've decided to bubble wrap the handle and coil the antenna inside its own protective sleeve. With that in mind, let's start packing by placing the instruction manual first, so it sits flat behind Artoo. Next, we'll add the remote antenna. Now we carefully place the newly wrapped Artoo inside the foam, making sure he sits snug and secure. One by one, we add the remote handle, the spare motors, the repair kit, and a separate packet of silica gel, arranging each item thoughtfully so everything has its place and stays protected for the years to come. Now all that is left is to seal the container and label the contents inside. After a moment to make sure the lid sits flush, I secure everything so nothing shifts in storage. And as a final gesture, I label the container with the contents and a date, making it easy to identify this little package of memories years down the road. And that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you've enjoyed this journey into my vintage Star Wars collection and the steps I'm taking to preserve it for the future. Every piece I care for holds a memory, a moment from my childhood, a story of discovery, or a reminder of why these toys captured my imagination in the first place. By carefully storing and protecting them, I'm not just keeping the collection intact, I'm keeping those memories alive, ready to share with the next generation or simply to revisit on a quiet afternoon. Thank you for joining me again and for taking the time to see the care, thought, and history behind each piece. It's more than just collectibles, it's a personal legacy, preserved one careful step at a time.